I came back to surprise my wife 2 weeks early, and I found her on her knees in the laundry room scrubbing a stain out of my son-in-law's white carpet with a toothbrush, her hands raw, while he stood over her counting down from 10 like she was a child who'd misbehaved. I didn't yell. I didn't say a word. I just stood in that doorway and watched, because I needed him to keep going long enough for me to remember every second of it. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to do something for me. Family, hit that subscribe button if you believe our elders deserve to be treated like royalty, not like the help. And tell me in the comments which city you're watching this from tonight. My name is Walter Briggs, and to most folks who know me, I'm just an old retired mechanic from Macon, Georgia. A man who spent 41 years with grease under his fingernails and a bad knee from kneeling under cars too long. They see my work boots and my church suit that's a size too big now, and they assume I scraped by on a pension and a prayer. They have no idea. They don't know that the little transmission shop I opened in 1987 became 4 shops, then a regional auto parts distribution company, then a holding company that now owns 4 of those shops, a fleet leasing business, and a piece of the commercial real estate under half the strip malls on the south side of Atlanta. They don't know that 3 weeks before this story starts, I was in a boardroom in Charlotte, finalizing the sale of a logistics division for an amount with 9 figures attached to it. I built all of that quietly, on purpose, because I learned a long time ago that money changes how people look at you, and I wanted to know, really know, who in my life loved me, and who loved what I could give them. I had been gone 2 months that time, handling the Charlotte deal and a smaller acquisition in Memphis. I missed my wife something fierce. Odessa and I have been married 43 years. She is the only person on this earth who knows the full truth of what we have, and she has never once asked me for anything beyond a garden, a sewing machine, and Sunday dinner with family around the table. When our daughter Renee married Marcus, a smooth-talking young man with a fresh law degree and a hunger in his eyes that I recognized because I used to have it myself, Odessa and I wanted to help them start right. I bought them a beautiful colonial in a gated community outside Charlotte through a trust nobody but my lawyer knew about. I paid it off in full. I funded the renovation of the kitchen Renee always dreamed of. I even made a few calls that got Marcus his position at a mid-sized law firm, a position he believes to this day he earned purely on his own brilliance. All we asked in return, the only thing, was that when I traveled for business, they would look after Odessa, who had just had knee replacement surgery and needed help getting around, needed someone to check on her, needed family. I trusted my daughter with the most precious thing I had. I trusted that even a man as ambitious as Marcus would have the basic decency to treat his wife's mother like a human being. I was wrong, and that wrongness nearly cost me everything that ever mattered. It was a Thursday evening in late February when my flight landed in Charlotte. I didn't call ahead. I wanted to see Odessa's face light up when I walked through that door unannounced, the way it always did, like I was still that 26-year-old boy who used to pick her up in a truck with no air conditioning. I took a car service straight from the airport. The closer we got to the neighborhood, the more my stomach started turning, the way it used to right before a deal went sideways. I have trusted that feeling my whole life. It has never once lied to me. We pulled up to the house, and every light in it was blazing. Cars I didn't recognize lined the circular driveway, a Bentley, 2 Mercedes, something low and Italian that probably cost more than my first 3 transmission shops combined. Renee hadn't mentioned a party. I paid the driver, grabbed my duffel bag, and walked up toward the house I had bought with cash, feeling the cold cut through my coat. I could hear music thumping inside, the kind of music rich people play at parties to sound like they appreciate jazz without actually listening to it. Through the big bay window, I could see shadows moving, glasses being raised, the particular kind of laughter people do when they're trying to impress each other. I was almost to the front porch when I heard it, a small, broken sound somewhere off to the side, near the laundry room window that faced the driveway. I stopped. I set my bag down slow and quiet, the way you do when you don't trust what you're about to find. I moved toward the window and looked in, and there she was, my Odessa. On her knees, on the tile floor, wearing an old gray housecoat I didn't recognize. A coat with a tear at the shoulder. Her silver hair, usually pinned up so neat for church, was falling loose and damp around her face. She was scrubbing at the white carpet runner just outside the laundry room with a toothbrush, her hands red and shaking, and standing over her, holding a glass of dark liquor, was Marcus. He was in a tailored charcoal suit, looking down at her the way you look at something you stepped in. "You've got until I count to 10, he was saying, loud enough that I could hear him clear through the glass. "Or, you go back to the basement, and this time, I'm not bringing you a blanket." He started counting. 10, 9. Odessa's hands were moving faster, scrubbing at a stain that I could see, even from where I stood, wasn't coming out, because it had probably set in hours ago. 8, 7. She was crying without making a sound, the kind of crying you do when you've learned that making noise only makes things worse. "You embarrass me in front of my partners one more time," Marcus said, his voice dropping low and ugly. "And I will have you committed so fast your head will spin, old woman. Renee will sign whatever I put in front of her. You understand me?" Something in my chest went cold and very still. The man I had been for 63 years, patient, slow to anger, a man who believed in giving people the benefit of the doubt because life had given me plenty of chances. I didn't deserve that man. Stepped back into the shadows of the driveway and let something else come forward. I walked to the front door instead of the side window. I didn't knock. I turned the handle, and it gave. And I stepped into a foyer full of perfume and candlelight, and 20-some well-dressed strangers holding champagne flutes, all turning to look at the soaking wet old man in work boots, standing in the doorway with a duffel bag. Conversation died in patches as people noticed me. I scanned the room until I found my daughter, Renee, standing near the fireplace in a green dress, laughing at something a woman beside her had said, a drink in her hand, not a care on her face. "Daddy?" she said, startled, setting her glass down. "What are you? We didn't know you were coming." "Where's your mother?" I said. It wasn't a question. Renee's smile faltered for just a flicker, just long enough for me to see the lie forming behind her eyes before it even left her mouth. "She's resting, Daddy." "She gets tired in the evenings now. You know how she is." "I know how she is," I said. "I just watched your husband threaten to have her committed while she scrubbed your floor on her knees with a toothbrush. The room went so quiet, you could hear the ice settling in somebody's glass." Marcus came around the corner from the laundry hallway at that exact moment, smoothing his jacket, his face arranging itself into a smile that didn't reach his eyes when he saw me. "Walter," he said, "you should have called ahead. We'd have made up the guest room properly." "Where is my wife?" I said again, and this time my voice came out lower than I intended, low enough that two of his lawyer friends near the bar actually took a step back. "She had an accident," Marcus said smoothly, like he was reciting something he'd rehearsed many times. "Spilled wine on the runner. You know how she gets, Walter. Ever since the surgery, the medication, she's not always clear. We just have her help out a little around the house. Keeps her active, keeps her mind sharp. It's actually good for her." "You had her on her knees," I said, "and you were counting down like she's a dog you're about to put outside." A woman near the bar gasped softly. Marcus's smile thinned. "Walter, I think the flight has you confused. Why don't you sit down? I'll have someone bring you a plate." I walked past him. I walked past Renee. I walked down that hallway to the laundry room, and I found my wife still on her knees, still scrubbing, tears streaming silently down a face I had loved since I was 19 years old. "Odessa," I said softly. "It's me." "It's Walter." She flinched at the sound of my voice, actually flinched, like I was someone who might hit her. And that flinch is something I will carry to my grave. "I'm sorry," she whispered, not looking up. "I'm almost done, sir, I promise. Please don't put me back downstairs. It's so cold. Please. Sir." My wife of 43 years called me sir, because somewhere along the way, in my absence, she had been broken down to a place where she no longer trusted that the man standing over her was someone who loved her. I knelt down beside her, slow, my bad knees screaming at me, and I took the toothbrush gently out of her hand and set it aside. "Look at me, B," I said, the nickname I'd called her since our first date at a diner in 1983. Something in her eyes flickered, a single thread of recognition trying to pull itself up out of the fog. "Walter?" she said, barely a breath. "Yes," I said, my voice breaking despite every effort I made to keep it steady. "It's me. I'm here. Nobody is ever putting you anywhere again." I helped her stand, supporting her weight, feeling how light she had become, how her once strong arms felt like they belonged to a much smaller woman. I took off my coat and wrapped it around her shoulders over that thin gray housecoat. Marcus appeared in the hallway behind us, his patience clearly cracking now that the audience had thinned out to just family. "Walter, you're making a scene," he said. "She's confused. That's all this is. You're going to upset her further." "You wiped your liquor glass on the table like you wipe your conscience," I said, turning to look at him, and I let him see. Just for a second, exactly what was underneath the flannel shirt and the work boots. "I'm taking my wife to a hotel tonight." "With what money, old man?" Marcus said, some of the oily charm slipping off his face now, the real thing showing through underneath. "You think a mechanic's pension covers the Ritz? Take her to the Motel 6 on Route 9 if you want, but don't come crawling back here asking for the guest cottage when you realize you can't afford anything better." I looked at him for a long moment, memorizing his face, the particular shape of his contempt, the way he had no idea that he was looking at the man who, through 3 layers of holding companies, owned the trust that held the deed to the very house he was standing in. "All right, Marcus," I said. "We'll go." His mouth curled into something satisfied. "Smart man." "There's a shelter on Independence Boulevard. I hear they take walk-ins." I helped Odessa down the front steps, past the Bentley and the Mercedes, into the cold February night, and I called for a car. While we waited at the curb, she gripped my arm with both hands like she was afraid I might disappear, and she started talking, quiet and broken, the words spilling out of her now that she finally felt safe enough to let them. "They told me I was getting confused, Walter. They said I kept forgetting things, that I was making messes, that I needed structure. Marcus gives me pills every morning, says the doctor prescribed them, says they're for my blood pressure. But I don't feel right, Walter. I don't feel like myself. My head is so foggy all the time. And when I told Renee I didn't think the pills were right, she said I was being paranoid. That's what they always say now. Paranoid, confused, dramatic." A car pulled up. I got her inside, into the warmth, and I told the driver to take us to the Ballantine Hotel downtown, the penthouse suite. The driver glanced at us in the rear view, an old man in a soaked flannel shirt and a frail woman in a torn housecoat, and didn't say a word, just nodded and pulled away. I held Odessa's cold hands in mine the whole ride. "You're safe now, B," I whispered. "I promise you, by the time I'm finished, that man is going to learn exactly whose ground he's been standing on." At the hotel, the staff knew me by name, the way staff at certain hotels in certain cities always do. Nobody blinked at my wet clothes or my wife's condition. Within 20 minutes, we were in a suite with a view of the whole city, and I ran her a hot bath myself, helped her out of that gray housecoat. And when I saw her body underneath, I had to leave the room for a minute and stand in the hallway with my forehead against the wall because I could not let her see me break. She had lost so much weight, her collarbones stood out sharp under her skin. There were bruises on her upper arms, the particular yellow-purple of fingers gripping too hard, more than once. There was a burn mark on the back of her hand that she wouldn't explain when I asked, just shook her head and looked away. I washed her hair the way I used to when we were young and she was recovering from delivering Renee, gentle, slow, humming the old hymn she liked. She fell asleep in the warm water, exhausted in a way that wasn't just physical. I carried her to the bed and sat in the chair across the room and did not sleep 1 minute that whole night. At 3 a.m, I called my attorney, a woman named Diane Castellano, who had been with me for 22 years and had never once flinched at anything I asked her to do. "Walter," she said, not even sounding groggy, because Diane Castellano does not sleep like normal people. "What's happened?" I told her everything, the laundry room, the counting, the basement, the pills, the bruises. There was a long silence on the line. "Walter," she finally said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. If they have been medicating her without proper authorization, that is not a family matter anymore. That is potentially elder abuse and possibly attempted fraud if they're trying to establish incompetency for legal purposes. I am calling Dr. Okafor first thing this morning, and I want a full toxicology screen, full nutritional panel, and photographs of every mark on her body. Do it," I said, "and Diane, find out what's been happening with the trust accounts. Find out everything." "Already starting," she said. "And Marcus?" The same question Leonard had once asked me, except this time it was about my son-in-law, and the weight of it landed the same ugly way. "What about Renee?" I said, before she could finish, because I already knew what was coming. "She was in that house, Diane." She watched her mother on her knees with a toothbrush and went back to her party. Diane was quiet for a moment. "I'll find out everything," she said again, gentler this time, and we hung up. The next morning, Dr. Theo Okafor met us at his private practice before regular hours, an old friend from my years coaching Renee's youth basketball league, back when I still drove a truck with a magnetic sign on the door that said Briggs, Transmission. He took one look at Odessa, and his professional composure cracked clean down the middle. "Walter," he said, "what in God's name happened to her?" "Run everything," I told him. "Tox screen, nutrition, blood work, all of it. I need it documented." While the nurses took her back, I stood in the hallway and called Renee. She picked up on the second ring, her voice tight and defensive, before I even said a word. "Daddy, where did you take her?" "Marcus is furious. You can't just kidnap Mom in the middle of the night and disappear. Do you have any idea how that looks?" "How it looks?" I repeated. "Renee, your mother was on her knees scrubbing a carpet while your husband threatened to have her committed. She makes messes, Daddy. You don't understand what it's been like. She forgets things. She wanders." The doctor said structure helps with that kind of confusion. "Which doctor?" I said. Silence. "Marcus's friend," she finally admitted. "He does house calls. He said the medication would help her settle." "Renee," I said, my voice steady and cold in a way I had never used with my own child before. "Your mother does not have dementia. Your mother has been drugged by your husband so that he can convince a judge she's incompetent. Do you understand what I'm telling you? That's insane, Daddy. Marcus would never—" "I am not bringing her back," I said. "I'm coming to the house Saturday." "Tell Marcus to be there." "Saturday? Why Saturday? What's Saturday?" I hung up before she could finish the question, because the answer was going to be the worst night of their lives, and I wanted them to sit with the uncertainty until then. Dr. Okafor called me into his office 2 hours later, a thick file in his hands, his jaw tight. "Walter, sit down." I sat. "She's lost 34 pounds in roughly 10 weeks. Her electrolytes are critically low, she's severely dehydrated, and Walter the tox screen came back. She has therapeutic levels of quetiapine and lorazepam in her system. These are not blood pressure medications. These are heavy psychiatric drugs, typically prescribed for severe agitation or psychosis. Given daily to a woman with no psychiatric history, they would absolutely produce confusion, memory lapses, and a kind of compliant fog that could very easily be mistaken for early dementia by anyone who didn't know better." The room tilted around me. "Why?" I asked, though I already knew the shape of the answer even before he said it. "If a doctor diagnoses dementia," he said, "she loses standing to make her own decisions. Power of attorney can be challenged or transferred. Testimony becomes unreliable, and someone with the right paperwork can have her committed to a facility permanently without much of a fight at all. They had been poisoning my wife to erase her, legally, on paper, so that whatever they were planning could happen without her objection ever counting for anything." I called Diane back the moment I left the hospital. "Change in plans," I told her. "I don't just want the house anymore. I want everything Marcus owns and everything he owes. Find out what they did with the trust's medical fund." She called back within the hour, and her voice had an edge to it I rarely heard from her. "Walter?" I pulled the account logs. There was an emergency medical fund set up for Odessa's care, $60,000. It's gone, drained over the last 4 months. Marcus forged a signature authorization. Renee's, not Odessa's, interestingly, and used it on a down payment for a lake house in the mountains and a custom Italian motorcycle. A lake house and a motorcycle bought with money meant to keep my wife alive and comfortable while she knelt on a tile floor in a torn housecoat being threatened with a basement. "Diane," I said, my voice now perfectly calm in the way that should have worried her more than shouting would have. "I want you to buy every piece of debt that man has. Credit cards, the motorcycle loan, the lake house mortgage, his bar association dues, if you can manage it. Use the Briggs Holdings shell, not my name." "Already moving," she said. "What else?" Find out who owns the law firm he works for. I already know that one, Walter. It's Caldwell Pruitt Sterling. I started laughing, a dry, humorless sound that didn't have anything funny behind it. Diane, Caldwell Pruitt Sterling has been retained by Briggs Holdings for 11 years. We're their second largest client. Get the managing partner on the phone. Tell him the Briggs family will be attending Marcus's partnership announcement Saturday night. And tell him to pull the home security footage from the Charlotte property. The system runs through our network because the house belongs to the trust. Walter, Diane said slowly. Saturday is going to be devastating for them. It's not going to be devastating, I said, looking out at the gray Charlotte skyline. It's going to be an eviction with extra steps. I spent the next 2 days in total silence, phone off, letting Marcus and Renee believe whatever story let them sleep at night, that I was a confused old man hiding in a cheap motel, embarrassed and broke, too proud to admit defeat. I let the threatening texts roll in unanswered, the ones about cutting off insurance, the ones about calling the police on me for elder kidnapping, each one digging their grave a little deeper. I focused everything on Odessa. With proper food, fluids, rest, and without those drugs working against her system, the fog began lifting hour by hour. Memories returned in pieces, painful but clarifying, the basement door locking from the outside. Renee walking past her in the hallway without a word, for days at a time. The specific cruelty of being handed cold leftovers on a paper plate while the family ate at the table 15 feet away. She cried more than I'd ever seen her cry in 43 years of marriage. But underneath the tears, there was something hardening too, something I recognized, because it was the same thing that had built 4 transmission shops out of nothing. On Friday, I took her to a boutique on a quiet street in uptown Charlotte, the kind of place that doesn't put price tags in the window. I bought her a deep emerald gown, hand-beaded, the kind of dress that makes a room go quiet when a woman walks into it. I bought her pearls that had been in a vault for 40 years, finally given a reason to see daylight. I had her hair done, her color restored to its rich natural black, with the silver woven through like she'd always worn it before this all began. And I bought myself a suit that fit like it had been made for the man I actually was, instead of the one I'd pretended to be for 30 years. Saturday evening came. Marcus was hosting his partnership celebration, the law firm's youngest partner in firm history, an achievement he believed he had clawed out of pure talent and hustle, never once suspecting whose money had opened that door. We took a car to the Charlotte airfield, then a helicopter the short distance to the estate, landing in the back field as the party noise carried across the lawn. A Rolls-Royce was waiting on the tarmac, arranged by Diane, and it carried us up the long driveway to the same front steps where my wife had once been forced to her knees. I took Odessa's hand. "Are you ready, my love?" I asked her. She looked at the glowing house, at the pearls at her throat, and her eyes were sharper and clearer than I'd seen them in years. "Let's go remind them who they're dealing with," she said. The chauffeur opened the door. We walked up those steps together, and the front door stood open, light and music and laughter spilling out into the cold night. We stepped into the foyer, and the room noticed us the way a room notices a sudden change in air pressure, conversation faltering, heads turning, the band's saxophone player losing the thread of his solo for half a measure before catching it again. Marcus stood near the fireplace in a custom tuxedo, champagne in hand, surrounded by partners and clients, mid-laugh at something, when his eyes landed on us and his whole face changed. He did not see a broke old mechanic and a confused old woman. He saw a man in a suit that cost more than most cars, standing beside a woman wearing pearls that had probably been appraised by people in this very room, and the math wasn't adding up fast enough for him. "Walter," he said, setting his glass down too quickly, some of it sloshing over his hand. Whose car is that? Who let you?" "Hello, Marcus," I said, and I let myself smile, the kind of smile a man gives right before he tells you the deal is already closed. "I believe we have some business to discuss." Renee appeared from the crowd, her face going pale at the sight of her mother standing tall and clear-eyed in emerald silk. "Mom?" she said, her voice small for the first time all night. You look like myself again," Odessa said, "for the first time in months." The managing partner of Caldwell Pruitt Sterling, a tall, silver-haired man named Harold Pruitt, stepped forward from near the bar, and the look on his face told Marcus everything was about to come apart before a single word was spoken. Marcus, Harold said quietly, I think you should know that Mr. Briggs here is the controlling principal of Briggs Holdings, your firm's largest retained client for the last 11 years. The room went so silent, I could hear ice settling in glasses across the room. I also think you should know, I continued, my voice carrying easily through that silence, that the house you're standing in belongs to a trust I control. The security system on this property feeds directly to my company's network, which means I have 11 months of footage, including footage from this past Thursday night, of you threatening my wife in the laundry room. I also have a full medical record showing the psychiatric medications you and your associate doctor have been administering to a woman with no psychiatric diagnosis, in quantities consistent with deliberately inducing the appearance of dementia. And I have bank records showing the $60,000 you stole from my wife's medical fund to buy yourself a lake house and a motorcycle. Marcus's face had gone the color of old paper. Walter, I can explain. There's context you're missing. I'm not finished, I said, and the room stayed dead silent. Every partner and client present now watching their newest partner's career disintegrate in real time. As of 9 o'clock this morning, every debt you carry, your credit cards, your motorcycle loan, the mortgage on that lake house, is owned by a company controlled by my attorney. As of this afternoon, the foreclosure paperwork on this house has been filed, since you are not now, nor have you ever been, anything but a guest in a home owned by my family's trust. And as of right now, Harold, I would very much like to know whether your firm intends to retain a man currently under investigation for elder abuse, medical fraud, and theft from a family trust, because if the answer is yes, Briggs Holdings will be retaining new counsel by Monday morning. Harold didn't hesitate. Marcus, your employment with this firm is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. Renee grabbed my arm, tears spilling over now, finally seeing the full shape of what her silence had built. Daddy, please. I didn't know about the medicine. I swear I didn't know. I just thought she was getting older. You watched her on her knees, Renee, I said, and my voice came out softer than I expected, sadder than angry now. You walked past her in that hallway, and you said nothing. I don't need you to have known about the pills to know what you did and didn't do. What happens to me? She whispered. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do? I have nothing. You have your own two hands, I said. The same ones your mother used for 40 years to build a life she never once complained about. I suggest you start using them. The fallout took about 4 months to fully run its course. Marcus was disbarred after the medical board investigation into his house call doctor confirmed the man wasn't licensed in the state at all and had been paid in cash for over a year to write prescriptions he had no business writing. He pled out on the fraud charges to avoid a longer sentence and is currently working off a restitution order that will follow him for the next decade. The lake house and the motorcycle were both seized and sold at auction, the proceeds going toward Odessa's medical bills, which I never actually needed but insisted on collecting anyway, because some debts need to be paid in full to mean anything. Renee moved into a small apartment across town, and last I heard from Diane, who keeps tabs on these things at my request, took a job folding clothes at a retail store in a strip mall not far from the very neighborhood she used to drive past in her Mercedes without a second glance. I drove past that strip mall once, a few months later, on my way to a meeting, and I saw her through the window, refolding a stack of sweaters a careless customer had pulled apart, her name tag catching the fluorescent light. She looked up, and our eyes met for just a second through the glass. I saw her hand start to rise, the way a person reaches for a rope they hope is still there. I didn't stop the car. I didn't wave. I just let the light change and let the car carry me forward, because some bridges, once they're burned all the way down, aren't meant to be rebuilt out of guilt. They're meant to stay burned until the person on the other side has truly become someone different. Odessa and I sold the Charlotte house eventually. Too many memories soaked into those floors that no amount of scrubbing would ever lift back out. And we built a smaller place on the Georgia coast instead. Nothing flashy, just a porch facing the water and a garden out back where she grows tomatoes and roses side by side, the way her mother taught her 60 years ago. Most evenings I sit beside her on that porch and watch the light change over the marsh, and I think about how close I came to losing her to a slow, quiet erasure dressed up as family care. I think about Marcus and Renee sometimes, not with the rage I carried that first night, but with something more like a tired, distant clarity. They mistook my plain clothes and my calloused hands for weakness, the same mistake people have been making about quiet working men since the beginning of time. They forgot that the man who fixes the engine is the one who actually understands how the whole machine runs, and they forgot that real power was never about the suit or the car or the title on the door. It was always about whether you'd still protect the people you love when nobody important was watching. I held my wife's hand on her knees on a cold tile floor, and I'm still holding it now, years later, on a warm porch by the water. And that, more than any company I ever built, is the only fortune that ever actually meant anything to me. If you believe family is supposed to protect each other instead of destroy each other, let me know in the comments, and tell me, should Renee ever get a second chance, or did she earn exactly the life she's living now? I'll see you in the next story, family. Real strength was never the suit, the money, or the title on the door. It was Walter's quiet hands, still holding on when no one important was watching. Gentleness isn't weakness, and silence isn't surrender. Sometimes the kindest people are simply waiting for the right moment. So love loud while you can, check on your elders, and never mistake someone's plain clothes for the size of their heart. A small note for you, family. This story was written and fictionalized by AI purely for entertainment, though we hope its heart still left you with something warm and true